Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. We're so happy to have you back. So last month, in an interview after being elected president, Donald Trump, when sitting down with NBC News' Kristen Welker on Meet the Press, said that he would attribute his 2024 election victory to one thing. Here's that video.
But I won on the border, and I won on groceries. It's a very simple word, groceries. Like almost, who uses the word? I started using the word. The groceries, when you buy apples, when you buy bacon, when you buy eggs, they would double and triple the price over a short period of time. And I won an election based on that. We're going to bring those prices way down.
I want to pause.
The apples, the bacon, the eggs. He's got it all down. But in his words, in his own words, this was the reason he won the 2024 election. He was running against Kamala Harris when she was talking about combating corporate price gouging, making affordable housing, saving democracy, among so many other things. Of all the things that was talked about in that election, groceries is what Donald Trump thinks won him the election. And what would that mean? Conventional thinking suggests that if a president wins on an issue, they're going to essentially deal with that issue as soon as they come into office. Like that is what they want to do. That is how they want to approach this new administration. I mean, that's what the American people sent them in for. And besides, Republicans and Trump together have been screaming around in Washington that they have some sort of mandate to govern. I mean, I don't know how big of a mandate they really have. 2 seats in the House is not quite the mandate, but whatever it is, that's just semantics. The point is, they are going around saying that they won the American people's trust. And according to Donald Trump, that issue was groceries. That's what got them in. Now, you'd think that he would begin addressing his presidency like that. You'd think. And when you see a flurry of executive orders getting signed one by one, 26 actually on that first day, record-breaking 26, you'd think that at least one of them would feature costs. I mean, I'll tell you some of the other things that were mentioned. Establishing the Department of Government Efficiency, or as the meme people like to call it, DOGE, unleashing Alaska's greatness, whatever that means, and eliminating DEI programs. So many top-level priorities for this administration. They have so much that they want to talk about. But what about my eggs? What about the eggs? Well, you might wonder, in those 26 executive orders, there's got to be something. There's got to be something that talks about costs. And to your surprise, I'm guessing, the answer is actually no. Not one of those first-day executive orders had to do anything with costs, except for one. The first executive order that Donald Trump signed into law, or not into law, but signed, was revoking about 80 Biden-era executive orders. And one of those executive orders was literally titled lowering the cost of prescription drugs. This was something signed in 2022. So Donald Trump revoked that in addition to a bunch of other Biden-era things, but that was the first thing that he signed. And so really the only thing, if we had to talk about the issue of costs, the only thing that Donald Trump did when it came to costs was literally raising them for certain Americans, because that executive order helped lower prescription drug costs, allowed for bargaining, allowed for the price caps, threw all of that out the door, and basically said, no, we're going to raise the cost. So I guess they did something about cost. They did something. But the bacon, the apples, the eggs, the groceries, what about that? So the point in bringing up this little anecdote is to talk about to question the priorities of this new administration. What are their goals? Like what is it that they're trying to do? Why do they want to do the things they're doing? And are they really addressing the issues that are top of mind for American voters? Most Republicans have been saying that this was an economy election, that people voted because of how their wallets felt. Yet, not one of the first executive actions that Donald Trump signed had anything to do with that. And we'll talk about some of those executive orders in just a second. But the point is, this issue of costs, the groceries, none of it. It's not a deal. It's not that big of a deal to this administration. And we'll talk about some of the things they've done in their first few days, but it's not going to be anything that you would have expected. So let's talk about the second Trump administration. Let's talk about how those first 9 or so days have been going. So he signed, like I said, a flurry of executive orders. And for my viewers who don't know, executive orders are essentially directives from the president on how laws should be interpreted, how laws should be carried out. Like, it's not changing the law or anything. Like, it's not saying that we are going to fundamentally alter something that Congress told us. They have to do what Congress told them, but the president has a prerogative in how it's actually carried out. So we can talk about some of the things that the Trump administration did on day one, including border security. He declared a national emergency, deployed 1,500 military personnel, birthright citizenship. This one's an interesting topic. He signed an executive order essentially prohibiting birthright citizenship for the children of undocumented immigrants. As you know, the issue of illegal immigration was another big topic in this election, but this executive order that Donald Trump signed, there's this thing called the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. And the 14th Amendment very clearly in its wording states that any person born on American soil is an American citizen. It was passed after the Civil War to ensure that the millions of freed slaves had nationality, they had citizenship and protections, and it's something that has consistently been in place. The Supreme Court even ruled on this issue. But Donald Trump now says that we're going to change that a bit. He's going to see things different. Now, a group of Democrat state attorneys general have challenged this executive order, and in all certainty, it's just not legal. It's not constitutional. So that's something that they're going to be working on. But in this whole issue of illegal immigration, there has been a huge amount of work that's been done. And the Trump administration has made a big deal out of it. But there's another point to this, which is how it's being done. Border crossings, you can look at the data, were already lower at the end of Biden's term when compared to the end of Trump's term. Like, they were lower, and they have been going down. But Donald Trump obviously said he won on the other issue of that being immigration and illegal immigration in particular. So mass deportations became a really big part of his week one agenda. And so ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they are doing a lot of work in trying to deport millions of people. That's the goal. They want it to be the largest mass deportation in human history, in their words. It's how they're doing it, because Obama did it. In fact, Obama actually sent back more people in his presidency than Donald Trump did in his first. It's not crazy. I think it's never been this issue of whether or not it should be done, because people on both sides will say that it is something that should be looked at. But there was something that this administration did, and is that they made a distinction between violent and nonviolent criminals, and labeled them in general as criminals. And the understanding was that they would send back violent criminals first. But we've been getting reports now that that's not really been the case. They've been going after people who have not been nonviolent, who have not broken the law, have followed the laws judiciously in this country, but, you know, they're also getting dragged into this. ICE has this floor, according to the Trump administration's Stephen Miller. He was on CNN yesterday, and he was talking about how ICE units have this 75 person goal. They have to send back 75 people every single day. And so there's a lot of that's been going on. There's another theatric aspect to all these deportations. Like, they have this whole deal of, like, let's make a big show out of it. I mean, this is a picture. You might recognize this guy. His name is Dr. Phil. You might recognize him from television. Dr. Phil was in Chicago just a while ago for immigration raids. What background does Dr. Phil have in any of this? Not much. But it's a made-for-TV type of event, and so they're going to have made-for-TV people help become the face of this. And they've told ICE agents to be ready to be camera ready. Like, they may be on camera as they're doing their work. It's one thing to make a spectacle out of it. It's another thing to completely make a theatric show out of all of this. I mean, that's where people begin to question it. But it's not even just that. There's a whole money aspect to this. Traditionally, when you look at these types of deportations, it costs roughly $100,000 to maybe charter a 12-hour flight to send a group of people back. That's how it's always been done. Yet, the Trump administration has been using military planes, not chartering normal planes like usual, using military planes, like in this picture that I'm showing right now, to send back these people. And while the normal chartered flights cost maybe $100,000, these planes cost $850,000. The C-130E flights, they can cost up to $852,000, and that's not even like, oh, that's the cheapest. Like, there are cheaper versions of this military aircraft that they could be using, like, for example, a C-17, which costs $252,000 per flight. I mean, when we cross into six figures for a one flight, I think that's already a question of efficiency. I'm pretty sure they created a Department of Government Efficiency. Not sure if spending $700,000 more on something that they could have easily cut costs on is necessarily the most efficient. But I guess that's what they're going to do. And this whole thing about the flight costs and everything, that's a really nice little thing that Rachel Maddow on MSNBC put out. So I should give credit where it's due. But, that is something, among other things. I shouldn't have been talking about this so much because I have so many other things. Like, I got a whole list of things. I focused on immigration for quite a while, but there are so many other things in terms of executive action that this administration has done right off the bat, like energy. The Keystone XL and Dakota Access pipelines were revived. Donald Trump withdrew out of the Paris Climate Accord. Like, we are, I think, the only country, maybe there's another one out there, but as far as I know, we are the only country that has entered it, exited it, entered it again, and exited again. Like, we like to break records in a way. He declared an energy emergency, ended the electric vehicle mandate, which wasn't really a thing, but And then DEI. This became a really big issue. Republicans have this really big problem with DEI. And so Donald Trump, when he came in, said, we are terminating DEI. And that's something they did. This is a picture of Pete Hegseth on it, now Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. That's one of his first things that he posted as Secretary of Defense. DOD does not equal DEI. It's the messaging of this administration. Like, they are not very much for this. So they have terminated DEI programs in federal agencies and have affected 2 million employees. They put out a new directive after doing that, saying, basically telling people to snitch, like snitch, as in, and I'm saying snitch like elementary school snitch on your colleagues if they are trying to push the radical DEI agenda. Like, if in secret, and then any federal employee was pushing forward some sort of DEI initiative in other names, like with another name, then you have to report that. Otherwise, you could face consequences yourself. Okay? But the DEI thing, they meant the whole thing. And some of it has questioned civil rights, talking about discrimination. talking about racism even. This is another leaked memo from DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, that has been circulating wide and around on Twitter that essentially says things like no observing Martin Luther King Day, Women's History Month, Juneteenth, Pride Month. Like this is a new directive. It's a part of this administration's really big thing about trying to combat diversity, equity, and inclusion. There was an incident with the Tuskegee Airmen educating Air Force cadets about the Tuskegee Airmen. You'll know they are the history-making African-American unit during World War II that did amazing work for our country. They were not taught about as a result of these policies. Senator Katie Britt of Alabama had to talk to the Secretary of Defense to reinstate that. I think this is how it works now. Like, you have to reinstate stuff that's not problematic, that according to them at least is not problematic in their view. But you know, it got shut down in the first act. And so it's like, what? Like, what's going on? Like, why are they, what is their whole crusade? But that is some of the executive action they took. This next part is a bit more of some of the news that has come out of this White House, in addition to all the bold executive action. First thing is the sweeping pardons of the January 6th rioters. I've talked about it too much on this show to relitigate the whole issue of January 6th again. You know that it was people that stormed the Capitol in the name of the 2020 election being stolen. It wasn't. And they were violent. Like, there's no walking around it. They were violent criminals. It's not everyone may have been violent. And maybe some people, I don't know, like, maybe not everyone in that whole incident was violent. There was a distinction, just like with the immigration thing. There was a distinction between violent and non-violent criminals. So there was this question before Trump took office about the issue of the January 6th rioters. Are they going to get pardons? It seemed like some would, at least. So the question then became, will the violent ones get pardons? And that is where it got a little confusing. Here's Vice President J.D. Vance just a few days before the inauguration talking about what those pardons would look like.
Look, if you protested peacefully on January the 6th and you've had Merrick Garland's Department of Justice treat you like a gang member, you should be pardoned. If you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. And
obviously, we're not going to pardon the violent criminals. Of course not. Of course not. Well, on the first day in this new White House, 1,500 people were given a blanket pardon in this whole situation. 1,500 people. That includes violent, non-violent, anyone whose name has been attached to the January 6th riots that were prosecuted. They were all pardoned, and it was a sweeping blanket pardon. Like, this was not anything. This was the maximum choice that could have been made by this president. J.D. Vance said, obviously, we're not going to pardon the violent criminals. Well, what happened? Because clearly you and your boss were not on the same page. And senators were, oh my goodness, they're saying, oh my goodness, what happened? Republican senators are like, what? I didn't expect this, but it's fine. That's the past. We're not going to look at the past. Okay, they're not going to look at the past, but then as soon as they said they're not looking at the past, Mike Johnson announces that they're going to create a new committee in the House to examine the January 6th riots, and they're going to examine the investigation into it. Because in their words, it was a sham investigation to begin with. So, bold action, I will call it bold because, they did it. They did quite the thing, and I think it's the bigger issue that you would find with something like this is that they said they wouldn't do it and then they did it, and what they did was pardon people who hurt cops. Like, for the party that always talks about backing the blue, talks about being pro-law enforcement, it's a little rich when their president, while he's signing an executive order, signing a pardon that pardons people who hurt police officers, some of whom even died that day, saying he backs law enforcement as he signs that. Like, there's an irony in that, and there's a really pointed little thing that I hope everybody sees with something like this. And this is just day one. After that, last Friday, so 5 days ago, feels like a year and a half at this point, 17 independent inspectors general at various agencies were fired. What's an inspector general? Well, the inspector general is someone in a federal agency who's responsible for finding waste, for finding, stupid stuff that goes on. They make a report. They tell the world, like, this is how certain department is working, and they're not doing a very good job of it. Like, they are wasting money here, here, and here. Their job is to hold people accountable. Their job is to hold people accountable. If anything, it's that Department of Government Efficiency thing that Donald Trump always prides himself in, and that Elon Musk is leading. Or maybe not, I don't know. That's a whole other can of worms. And we will probably not talk about that in this episode, but soon. We'll talk about it soon. But they fired 17 of these inspectors general on Friday, literally at midnight, when everyone's asleep, right before the weekend. They fired these people, and they basically say, you are not coming back to work. Well, that's it. They just said, you're not coming back to work. Goodbye. And what? They got rid of this important mechanism in every agency. They want to install their own people. Some of these inspectors general, I should add, were people that Trump appointed in his first term. Like, these were people Trump appointed who were doing basically the job of just making sure that the government wasn't spending our tax dollars wrong, that they weren't doing stupid stuff with our money. But again, they had to, who knows? Senator Chuck Grassley talked about how, because he's the Senate Judiciary Chairman and also a big passionate person when it comes to the issues of inspectors general. I didn't even know that there was an inspector general's caucus in Congress. But basically, there is a law that the president has to notify Congress 30 days in advance of firing inspectors general. This is a law in the books. Like, he has to do that. Donald Trump didn't do that. He just signed something Friday at midnight firing all these people. What happened to procedure? What happened? So they were fired. They were fired, and actually someone tried to go back in to office today even, and was asked to leave. So this bypassing of Congress, like, quite the rowdy thing to do. It sounds like something else, but I'll leave that part, the quiet part, unsaid. Maybe eventually we'll say it. But they fired them, and there's been bipartisan criticism. People are not happy about this. Chuck Grassley didn't even, well, he was not upset from his statement. It seemed more like, and the statement's probably up right now, but like, it's more of what the heck, man? Like, why are we doing this? Then let's go to what happened yesterday and kind of today, which is federal funding getting frozen. Trillions of dollars were in question because of an order Donald Trump signed Monday night, which froze federal funds, all federal funds that we can talk about. And I mean, it didn't freeze all of them. Factually, that's not accurate based on what we get from the White House, but I'll explain why I say all in a second. But there was an announcement that there would be a freeze on all federal funds, and it resulted in affecting programs like Medicaid, Head Start. Head Start is the program that helps low-income children go to preschool. SNAP, that's food assistance for millions of families. Meals on Wheels, that provides food for elderly people. There was a pause on research. It was wide-ranging, trillions of dollars. Now, Social Security and other individual assistance, as the White House put it, actually, it was not frozen, but I'm actually just going to play the clip of Caroline Leavitt, the new Trump administration press secretary, explain what was not frozen. Take a look.
There's no uncertainty in this building, so let me provide the certainty and the clarity that all of you need. This is not a blanket pause on federal assistance and grant programs from the Trump administration.
But that conflicts a little. That conflicts a little because there were reports coming out of states across the country, and I'm putting them up right now, the little headline bubbles, but like in Illinois, my home state, the Medicaid portal was completely frozen out. Like they were frozen out of the Medicaid deal. Then Chris Murphy of Connecticut was talking about how Head Start was not able to access its money to reimburse people. Meals on Wheels was in question. Like, it was a lot of confusion, chaos, and all this White House could do was say that we are trying to root out inefficiencies. That was not inefficient. That was something else. That was something else. Either, and like the language of this thing like included stuff, but either this administration, because either this administration was not sure what they were doing, or they knew exactly what they were doing and had to pull the plug because there was a lot of public outcry. In fact, there was so much intense backlash, they kept putting back in programs. They kept including more and more programs that were actually going to get cut. It was so much that this whole thing got rescinded today. There is a big, big question as to what exactly that is. And like I said, it's either that they didn't know what they were doing or they knew exactly what they were doing. Now, the reason I would say they wouldn't know what they're doing is because they included things like the Green New Deal, which is not law. They included the Green New Deal in this order. That's not law. So maybe they didn't know. But the other cynical part of me wonders if they knew exactly what they were doing, that they were trying to completely halt the federal government, trying to root out programs one by one, trying to basically put a hard stop on so many things so that they could, I don't know, pull back programs, pull back the spending. It threw people into a lot of chaos. It stressed people out. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you are on. The effects and the hurt that people experience, it is irresponsibility. It's just what it is, irresponsibility in the handling of trillions and trillions of dollars of federal funds. States that throw so much federal tax money to the federal government, they expect the money to come back. They didn't know if they were going to get that money back. People on Medicaid, they have appointments. I was talking to people on Medicaid, asking, they were asking, do you think that I will be able to go to my appointment? Because I don't know what the deal is. There's one video I found that I think just was absolutely it was a whole thing of this mom who didn't know if she was going to have her food assistance SNAP. She didn't know if she was going to have that and was virtually thrown into a panic attack. I'm going to play the video right here, but this is just one person out of so many who were affected in different ways. That's what this Trump administration is doing. They did that. Either they knew what they were doing or they didn't. This is not efficient. This is not, this whole thing of Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, it's a joke. Like, this is not what it was supposed to be. And millions of American families were thrown into doubt. They didn't know what was going on. And there's this new thing that came out saying that there's a buyout package for federal employees. I mean, I can just add that on to this whole shebang. But basically, all federal employees are offered buyouts worth 8 months of their salary as federal employees to quit the federal government. Like, they can quit. And the idea is that it's supposed to save hundreds of billions of dollars. Fine. Get rid of the federal workforce and save some money. So that was some of the stuff that this administration has done. I think I should address, because I think this is the first episode, not the Meet the Trump administration, because that was pre-recorded, but this is the first episode in the Trump administration. And like, there is this whole thing, like 9 days worth of chaos has brought on a lot of stuff. Like, you can see it, like 4 pages worth. And that, I haven't even talked about half the other things. There's this whole thing of flooding the zone, as former Trump advisor Steve Bannon said. Flood the zone, fill everything fill the news with all sorts of crazy headlines, so that people in the news keep covering all of those things, so that while they're doing that, you can carry out your own agenda. This is a literal strategy. And they're doing that right now because they want to do stuff. And for better or for worse, I don't know. That's your judgment to make. I'm not going to tell you how to think. But they're going to flood the zone with all these headlines so that they can do stuff on the side. I don't know how you may feel about that, but that creates a big onus on people in the news to cover what goes on, to talk about that. So, and it's just not just us in the news, it's people across the board. You should be informing yourself. You should be advocating for stuff that you care about, because it's not going to work if you don't care. But that's my 2 cents. Going into this new administration, I want to cover this more. Even with the Meet the Trump administration, I know I was supposed to get something out yesterday. I didn't, because I don't have access to my studio. As you can tell, I'm not actually in the studio. You can see the background. There's no Ishan S. show back there. That's because I'm in a different environment, and so it's hard to make these. And making the Meet the Trump administration episode was not particularly easy. But it's fine. I will go back from time to time, and I will try to make use of my surroundings to make these episodes. But the point is that I want to be covering this. I want to talk about the issues. So if you have ideas, if you have views, put it in the comments. Share your thoughts with me. Follow us on social media. Share this episode and all your other favorite episodes with your friends and family. Keep yourself informed. I keep trying to ask more, but I don't know. I've said this spiel so much. So just stay tuned, keep informing yourself, and we'll see you in the next episode. Maybe we'll have even more stuff to talk about, but we'll see you in the next one.